No. Here we go. I see it.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another COVID Justice Coalition virtual town hall. We're so happy that you can join us. I am just going to do a quick intro for our moderator tonight. It is the lovely Jen Carter, powerhouse advocate, and she is co-founder of the Humanization Project, an organization that she started with her partner who is currently behind bars, and they work to humanize people behind bars in the eyes of the general public, sharing their stories, their hopes, their passions, correspondence programs, research, and writing in hopes of furthering the compassionate need for criminal justice reform. So Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Johanna. And I'm so happy and honored to be moderating another one of these COVID-19 Justice Coalition virtual town halls. I'm the Humanization Project is part of the coalition, and I have really been enjoying working with all of the advocates in the coalition. And I think these town halls have been really educational for all of us and for the general public. And it's been really great to be able to do these. And so I'm really excited to be here and be able to moderate again. Before I introduce all the panelists, I'm going to quickly remind everyone that the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition is a group of, I think at this point, over 30 advocacy organizations, and we came together to advocate for people behind bars during the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were seeing what was going on in all the different facilities across the state. And we have 3 demands, and those demands are to release as many people as possible from state facilities, or from all facilities across the state, as quickly as possible, with safety, transparency, and oversight for the releases and also for the conditions that are going on behind bars during this time. So we have a wonderful panel of people this evening, kind of diverse in what they all do in this world, and they're all doing great work, which is awesome. And so I just want to quickly introduce us to everyone. So we're really honored tonight to have Delegate Kay Corey here with us. Delegate Corey has been representative for Virginia's 38th district, which is Fairfax County, since 2010. She has been an active leader in a diverse range of community organizations, including the Annandale Chamber of Commerce, the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, and the NAACP. She has fought hard for advocating for women, fighting to keep Medicaid expansion, standing strong for families, and working to protect the environment. So we're really excited to have Delegate Corey here tonight. Eden Heilman. Hi, Eden. Eden joined the ACLU of Virginia as the legal director in June of 2018. She leads the office's legal program, focusing on a broad array of civil rights and civil liberties issues impacting Virginia's citizens and communities, and using integrated advocacy strategies such as impact litigation, non-litigation advocacy, and public education. Prior to joining the ACLU of Virginia, Eden served as the managing attorney of the Southern Poverty Law Center's office in New Orleans, where she directed the organization's litigation and policy advocacy efforts in Louisiana, with a specific emphasis on children's rights, education, and juvenile justice. We are also honored to have Brian Kennedy, who is a member of our COVID-19 Justice Coalition Steering Committee, along with a few others of us. Brian is the Policy Director for Justice Forward Virginia, a nonpartisan organization that advocates for criminal legal system reform in Virginia. In that capacity, Brian works with legislators and other advocacy organizations to draft legislation and advocate to improve Virginia's troubled criminal system. For his day job, Brian is a senior assistant public defender with the Office of the Public Defender in Fairfax, Virginia. And then our 4th panelist, last but certainly not least, who I'm very, very excited to have on here tonight with his beautiful wife as well, is the lovely Tony Brown and his wife, Linda Brown. Tony has recently been released from prison, and he was in prison with my partner, and I got to meet him years ago now and have known him for quite some time. And as soon as I met him, he affectionately nicknamed me Smurfette, and we have been friends ever since. And I'm really excited to have him here. I know we're on Zoom, but to have him here out in the world with us in person to be able to talk to us tonight. And in fact, Tony, if you're okay, we're going to start with you. So you were in prison at the start of this COVID crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and how it felt to be behind bars with this pandemic starting in the world and everything that was going on when all that happened?
Well, thank you for having me, of course, and Linda. At the infancy of COVID-19, of course, inside of prison, you're isolated from everything, but it was more panic than preparation. So everyone was in a place of panic. They didn't know which steps to take. Every day it was something different. Monday it would be, we're gonna give you gloves. Tuesday you wouldn't get any. Wednesday you're gonna get chemicals to clean. Thursday you wouldn't. So it was a very unorganized process. I was at Greensville, so it was very, we're gonna play it by ear. It's gonna be, every day was just something different. So I think everyone was in a panic mode instead of preparation. And chemicals, there are very limited chemicals in prison. I don't know if everyone knows that. Cleaning supplies are very limited. You don't get anything in its natural state. So everything is watered down to the point where bleach wouldn't be bleach. If they were to give you a cleaning agent such as bleach, you wouldn't ever get anything that really would disinfect an area, that would really give you a clean environment to live in. Above your head where you see the ventilation system is years of dust, years of hair, years of dirt that is stockpiled upon the ventilation system within every housing unit. So at the beginning of COVID, no one knew what to do because I don't think anyone had experienced something of a magnitude of a pandemic, since 1918. And I don't believe anyone at Greensville was alive then. So it was just very panic versus preparation. And it's gotten worse and worse from the guys that I talked to that are still there. So it's continued to gradually go worse and worse and worse as far as cases, as far as calling home. They turned the phones off the other day so no one could call home. They let people stay in and just continue to just have it and try to snatch people out and put them into what they call a green or a clean pod where no one has it. The one thing that I will say is I was in the reentry pod, and the unit manager and the head of reentry, every day they came around with buckets of chemicals. They came around with gloves. They came around with masks. They gave us these sneeze guards of sort to make sure that that pod was in a process of, I guess, being the model pod to follow. And we were like the pilot pod for cleaning. So that was one benefit of being in a pod where the unit manager understood that everyone in the building was 6 months or less from being released. And they constantly encouraged more cleaning. They came around every day to make sure that there was no room for infections. There was no room. We went outside one building, one pod at a time. So it was only a possibility of 86 people in a space where you could actually have social distancing, and you couldn't go out without your sneeze guard on. You had to make sure that your cell had been cleaned. So the reentry pod was much different from the other buildings, the other 8 buildings on Greensville.
Right, yeah, and you're in touch with people at Greensville and other facilities now, and we know that your reentry pod sounded quite different than those other facilities.
Yes,
Tell me this also, you're in there, you're worried about the cleaning, you're worried about what's going on in there. How did it feel, being in there and then knowing what was going on outside? You have a very big, lovely, wonderful family, and you were there. Were you feeling, how did that feel knowing that they were out there trying to deal with all of this stuff?
Well, of course, everyone that's incarcerated is always more concerned about their family versus themselves.
Right.
Because for the most part, you're in an isolated environment, and unless the staff or medical facility or kitchen workers, people that leave and come back in, unless they bring something into prison, most of the time, people rarely get sick versus, something like cancer or things like that. But as far as the flu, it doesn't have a rampant effect on prisons. And COVID wasn't having a rampant effect until more staff members started to get it. And so, like I said, my wife personally, but I was always concerned but confident that she would take the right measures to make sure that her, our children, grandchildren, none of our immediate family would be affected because of a lack of our part of not wearing masks and not being social distancing and not, using Lysol wipes and things of that nature. So, our nickname for her is COVID Kathy because she's always on top of cleaning. And she's implemented that to us. Like everywhere we go, we have to wipe. I wear gloves everywhere I go, mask everywhere I go. So it's very important. People have taken for granted how it's not just about you.
Right.
It's more so about those who you care about and those who you may not know. This is a call for humanity, for everyone on the globe, not just the United States, but this is a global cry out for humanity to be human. So inside of that place, you have a lot of people that don't want to wear the mask or don't want to clean a cell and don't want to do the things that are necessary to keep others safe because it's not personally affecting me. So if it doesn't affect me, I don't really care. But then when someone gets sick that's in the cell with you, where if you can look over, let's say from the spot where Delegate Corey is sitting to where the painting is on her wall, that's the amount of livable space that you have in prison. You just make it into a rectangle and you have a toilet, a sink, and a bunk bed in there. So that small amount of space, there is no social distancing. So it's very difficult to even imagine how they're going to get a grip on it in prison without a vaccine or without just quarantining everyone and not letting anyone out. But you would have to bring in people from the outside to feed, to clean. And, the state doesn't produce that much money on the positive side for prisons. We know that it's not a place that's designed for success. I will say that much. It's not designed for success. From being there for 23 straight years of my life, I know that prison is not, if you don't want it to be successful for you, you will not end up being successful when you leave.
Right. Yeah. So, when the crisis started, we saw the legislation pass a budget amendment that would allow for early release for people who had less than a year left on their sentence. And that seemed very, very promising. And I think all the legislators thought, this is going to be good. This is going to make some space in prison. This is going to let some people out early. And then we have not seen DOC implementing it in a way that's really making a difference. So the COVID-19 Justice Coalition Legislative Committee Working Group, headed up by Brian Kennedy, put together a bill that we're calling the Public Health Emergency Release Bill. And it basically puts what happened with the budget amendment into the law and then holds DOC accountable to actually make it happen. So we're excited to have Brian here to talk about the bill for us. And then also Delegate Corey is getting this bill drafted as we speak. So Delegate Corey and Brian, maybe we can just talk a little bit about that bill and kind of what all it entails. I don't know, whoever would like to start, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Delegate. So basically, for anyone who's not familiar with the budget amendment, it said that the director of the Department of Corrections could let certain people go. So less than a year away from their release date. And then that was mostly it. It was given broad discretion to the director. The Department of Corrections then narrowed who they were going to actually let go. So they ended up creating release criteria based off a lot of things, risk assessment instruments, and certain charge categories, things that the General Assembly didn't fully anticipate when they passed the bill. And the biggest thing was that it was lucky that, in a crazy way, that COVID happened in between the end of our regular General Assembly session and the veto session, because otherwise the General Assembly wouldn't have been back and wouldn't have been able to do anything for COVID. So thank God, in a lot of ways, you all had to go back to Richmond in that tent and sit outside for a day in April. So the point of the bill that Delegate Corey has been kind enough to get drafted is basically to take the idea behind the budget amendment, which was a good one, like Jen said, put it in the law. So that'll be for this pandemic. And then if there's another future public health emergency, it will always be there, so we don't have to worry about the timing. And it would basically solve some problems we're having now, which include trying to get DOC to actually calculate release dates for people a little faster than they have been doing it over the past few months to get people actually released. And people are always worried about public safety in these type of bills. But the key to remember here is that under this bill and under the budget amendment, everyone who's being released was going to be released anyway in the next few months. They're all at the end of their time. Many people in Virginia are serving lengthy sentences. They were rehabilitated long ago, and they're fine to be released now, just like they're not going to be a danger and they're not going to be a problem to be released in a few months. And in Virginia, since we got rid of parole, every single person who's released has to be on some type of supervision. So every single person leaving a Virginia facility will be supervised by the probation and parole office where they live. So that's the main point of the bill. It also makes sure that there's some transparency to make sure that DOC is telling us who they're releasing.
Right.
I know Delegate Corey, you can probably speak to this, but several of your colleagues, Delegate Scott, Senator Morrissey, have both expressed at things I've been at that they've been trying to get information from DOC and they haven't gotten it. So if a General Assembly member cannot get it, surely the rest of us plebes cannot get it either. So that's what we saw to be the strengths of the bill, and the hope that we're not, God forbid this all happens to us again, if 5, 10, 100 years from now, the Virginia Code will be able to take care of it.
No, I think it's a very important bill, and I'm honored that you asked me if I would put it in. I have not gotten the draft back. So what I did get was about 20 questions from the drafter that I have not begun to answer. So I will share the questions with you. Jen, I'll send them to you tomorrow, and so that you can understand what I'm being asked and what I think the answers should be. But one of the most important pieces of this is the transparency. I was so disappointed the way that DOC impenetrably moved at a snail's pace. I think it's fair to say that it looked as if that entire department did not want to do this. And I think it's really important, regrettably, but it's really important that we codify the process and therefore commit the Commonwealth to doing this when there is a public health emergency. And I am hoping to be able to learn some things that DOC ran into that they think were problems that we can use the solutions to smooth the way. Because one of the things that I am emphasizing in the draft is that there has to be a plan for everyone. There has to be an algorithm, a formula for calculating for everyone. All of these pieces need to be in place now and be easily accessible so that we're not all sitting around and just hoping that things will go well. Because we all know that while hope is nice, I'd rather count on Fred. One thing I want to let you know that I have been working on criminal justice reform issues for maybe now the past 5 years. Like a lot of things, I fell into this. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I am truly a generalist community activist. And when I see a problem, it doesn't really matter to me what area it's in, what realm it's in, if it's in something I'm expert in or not. A problem that someone else is not solving, I need to solve. And that is how I came into the criminal justice reform, movement in Virginia. Accidentally, I learned, I began to work with the group, the Friends in Alexandria, the Friends, and that's what would you call it? A halfway house? I mean, it's a residence for that. Halfway house is wrong terminology, I'm sure.
Transition housing, I think, is probably the best way to.
Okay.
Friends of Guest House is what you're.
Thank you very much. Yes, and it's a place. Let's say it's a place where, when you are released, women, you can stay and get all the support that you need to figure out next steps. And the people there are phenomenal. And I, as I said, accidentally met them. And then they invited me to come and talk to the people who were staying there. And when I was talking to them, they were telling me their experiences. And it was overwhelming. The inadequacies, the cruelties, the irrational structure. Just, you all have been looking at this for a long time. So forgive me if I sound so naive, but I honestly did not expect the number of problems that were foisted upon the inmates, and especially on women, especially in healthcare. And after I finished talking to this group of about 20 women off and on for a couple of weeks, they wanted me to fix everything. And I said, now remember, this is Republicans, okay? So anyway, that we're in charge. So I asked them to choose one thing, one simple thing that we could put in 3 sentences. We could see if the Republicans would listen. And they asked me to put in a bill that would make menstrual products available at cost upon request, which is a rather shocking and sad state of affairs that was not already the case. And the stories were horrific about the need, so I won't even. And once I started doing that, I learned that we were the only state in the country that was making these available for free, which again is shocking and inhumane, and it was good. Lots of other states got in touch with me, and I think that we were able to help a lot of people. But anyway, I learned, sadly, the labyrinth that you have to go through to make any changes in our criminal justice system in DOC. And I've been in the legislature. I know I'm talking long, so I apologize, but I've been in this situation long enough to know that you can pass any old bill you want and go hooray, hooray, and go home, and nothing will happen. So you have to figure out what the next steps are, and you have to figure out who you have to call every week, et cetera, et cetera. As a community activist trained in the Saul Alinsky method, the way I got into politics was because my kids were going to school in a school that you had to put trash bags over the computers when it rained, that the floor melted one day because the steam heat underneath it came apart. And it was just, and I live in a real diverse community, lots of rich people, lots of poor people, every language in the universe, every nationality. I think it's like 80 languages at my kids' school where the floor melted. And so I started torturing the school board because it was ridiculous. And it didn't do much good. I made friends. And then one of the school board members was retiring and asked me if I would run. And I knew by then that you have to, it's political, it's sad. All the resource allocations, it's all political. So that's what I've learned. And I know you already knew about our criminal justice system. And so I started visiting the prisons to see if in fact women were getting the products, and learning so much more as I went to jails and prisons over the years. So last year I put in a bill about women who are pregnant in prison and the treatment that they should receive, the support they should receive, and the changes in the visitation regulations and spaces that we need to have. And like the menstrual products, I was very surprised. It was bipartisan support. Honestly, I think that bringing these issues up, there's an element of shaming. Those people in the legislature did not want to hear me talk about it. They just wanted to vote yes, 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 and have me sit down and be quiet. So I learned a lot. I made a number of friends across the country. It was Cut 50. Are you familiar with Cut 50? Cut 50 came to work with me, and so did the Conservative Institute. in Alexandria, the Koch brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so those groups were absolute partners in all these efforts, and they want to continue supporting criminal justice reform in Virginia, especially since now we have an administration and a General Assembly that wants to see these things through. I think I need your guidance as to what to try to do when. There's so many problems. I know it's overwhelming, and there's some internal structures that I would love to work on. Maybe you understand them better, but when I was working on the menstrual products, I learned, to my chagrin, about the board that has to approve everything and the language that they have to approve, and then the way they disseminate changes and improvements to the prisons and the jails, and the labyrinth that can take years. We got to change that.
Definitely.
So maybe you are good at figuring out that one.
We'll have to work on it. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
I love that you shared that the moment that brought you into criminal justice reform was meeting people who had been affected. And that's really what we are trying to do as the Humanization Project, is to say, not everyone can meet people directly, but here are some amazing human beings, and we will tell you.
Exactly. Well, that's how we got gay marriage. You know, people turned around and went, "Oh, I know somebody like that."
Exactly.
And yeah, so this is great. I'm so happy that you're doing this, and I hope that you will teach me, involve me, and support me, and let me be one of the voices that leads Virginia to improvement. We need so much, and what you're doing by bringing it to light.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. But I want to say one thing about the bill that I'm drafting. I'm not sure that it will be heard in this special session. Special session has rules and regulations that are in the Constitution about what subjects, what types of bills you can pass. And anything that we pass in this special session will not go into effect for 4 months, which is a long time, from August or September, depending on when we actually pass things. Not that we shouldn't try, we should, but know that there's a likelihood that a lot of the bills that you and I would like to see won't be heard. The priority is the budget. And then there are a few other priorities that are related to COVID-19. So I'm hoping that this bill can be considered in that list. But I don't know, and I'm not going to know. The House has to agree, the Senate has to agree, the governor has to agree. You might think all these 3 branches like each other. Not always. Anyway.
A lot of unknowns leading into this session.
I know. I'm not. I hope I'm not whining. Honest. I'm just trying to explain that even if we did pass exactly what you wrote, it would be quite a while before we saw it in effect.
That's a good thing for us to point out to the general public that's watching. People don't realize, they think, oh, we have this date, August 18th, are these things that happen that day? Like, no. They've got to vote, and then they have to be enacted and all of that.
Right.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. We're going to shift a little bit, and I want to come back to Tony. Tony, if that's okay with you. So Tony, as we said, just recently was released from prison, and Tony was actually released by being pardoned by the governor. Can you tell us a little bit, Tony, about what that whole process was like and how long it took, and just how it felt to sort of go through that briefly? I mean, we all know it's a bit crazy. And then we have something really, really exciting to talk about in that regard here with Eden. But I thought maybe if you could share just a little bit. And Linda, you're welcome to chime in too, because you both went through it together.
Number one, we have the best governor in the state that the state of Virginia has ever had. We have the best governor in the country, because I don't know if this is true, someone could fact check, but I believe we have the only physician for a governor in the United States.
Yes.
And so that's important, because when he gives sound advice, unlike Dr. Fauci, who's often rejected by our commander-in-chief, it's good to listen to someone that does know medicine. But the
Yes.
process, the pardon process for us was very lengthy. It was a 13-year process. Governors rejected it when we filed early.
Well, I'm gonna take this one over.
She'll take over.
We started the pardon request process when Tim Kaine was governor. But at the time, because we had a wonderful Democratic governor in Tim Kaine, we had a wonderful Democratic governor in McAuliffe, but we still had a Republican-controlled House.
Right.
So, that was really the problem in a nutshell. And most people don't really know, but in that pardon process, the parole board has a huge chunk in that because they do the investigation.
Right.
They do the decision of whether or not it, not the decision, but they do the recommendation. Let me change my industry jargon here. They do the recommendation as to whether or not that should go on or shouldn't go on to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. So, I must say that this parole board that has been in place since Governor Northam has been in office has probably been one of the best parole boards that's been in place.
Great.
I would say they've been the most competent and the most compassionate. Unfortunately, the Republican Party is doing everything they can right now to dismantle that.
I know.
But at the end of the day, no one person on the parole board has the authority to make a decision to parole or make the recommendation to pardon anybody. It takes so many votes. So you can't just blame the chairman, the chairwoman, or the assistant chairman or whatever, but it has been a lengthy process for us for that reason. Because for one, there weren't a lot of investigators. I think there were like 2 investigators for a long time. So when you don't have parole in Virginia, that's the first thing. You don't have parole.
I know.
Pardon is the only avenue for someone to try to obtain freedom early in the state right now. So you have so many pardon requests, but then you only had the parole board and 2 investigators. So these pardon requests just began to pile and pile and pile and pile and pile. So it wasn't until recently with our new governor that we have more investigators on staff now and a very competent and compassionate parole board. So that has been my fight and my fight throughout that whole process, was just staying on top of it. Hey, who's the player? Where is it? Where's the step? What's going on? And that, and also one thing to note is that when a person is looking for a pardon, because, a pardon really should only be for an extraordinary circumstance. We should have parole in Virginia. That's the #1 issue in criminal justice reform that we should be doing.
Well, we did pass that. We did pass that. Yeah. It's just on hold, like so many other things. Yes.
They want us to study again, which I'm okay with. So I'm hoping the study will be finished.
We still have some Republicans in the General Assembly. That's the problem.
That is true. That is true.
Yes, but we know.
we're I guess I'm saying that because we're moving more slowly than all of us at this meeting would like. Yes.
One thing that Mr. Kennedy, when he brought up for not having parole, when parole was abolished in '95, a lot of people in Virginia don't have a clue that there's no parole.
Right.
And then when Governor Allen, who was probably the worst governor we've ever had, when he started this prison for profit campaign and started to build the Sussex 1, the Sussex 2, the Red Onion, the Waller Ridges, and you don't have the classification for that type of prisoner in this state, but you're building supermax prisons that are pretty much taxing the citizens of Virginia. One prison 70 million, another prison 80 million. I was in those prisons. If you spent $70 million, Delegate Corey, on those prisons, somebody got some serious money on the back end, because that's no way it's $70 million. Anyway, with that being said,
right.
Virginia prisons don't own anything. The state of Virginia doesn't own anything that's in the prisons. The commissary is owned by Keefe, a company based out of St. Louis. Every commissary used to be ran by mom and pop type vendors that were local to the prison. Therefore, they
like in the jails,
local,
like the sheriffs.
yeah, right. And they employed people from that community to do commissary. It was someone that may have had something like a general store, so to say, like in Augusta, and they would have people that come in and work from the community. When they sold it off for contract to Keefe, a company based out of St. Louis, those local vendors lost that profit to raise money and take care of their families in their communities that they once had before Governor Allen did what he did. Then medical is so horrible in prison.
It is.
When I hear stories about the women, I'll give you one example. I was sick one time in 23 years in prison. One time, this was last year before I got out, I had a sinus infection. The warden took me to medical to get seen. They refused to see me because of an appointment. The warden walked me into medical and they refused to see me until the following day for a sinus infection. I had never been sick.
How can they do that? How can they refuse?
Because the company is a company based out of Georgia, and they aren't under anyone's jurisdiction or power.
That's right. I am working with Brian Moran about changing that and having, and of course, everything is money. And the Republicans took so much away from our criminal justice system. Excuse me for blaming them, but I will.
No, it's the truth.
But we need to have our own in-house, and we're working on it. Unfortunately, it's just really, really slowly. So I hope that you tell this to everybody you talk to.
Everybody I know, I scream from the rafters so they will know. The food is, when the state prisons were once almost like agrarian cultures where you grew your own farm products, you raised your own animals. These were things that were going on when I first went into prison. They sold the kitchen off, and then they bring in nothing but processed meat, old meat, things that are just, a human shouldn't eat, an animal shouldn't eat, but humans definitely shouldn't eat it. Rates of cancer among young prisoners raised so high during the last 10 years that I was in prison. I've never seen young people with cancer in prison. 20-year-old guys, 30-year-old guys, just coming in because of eating this food. They give it a name, it's called meat rock, because it looks like a rock-shaped meat patty. But it kills people. I mean, young people having nose cancer, throat cancer. There's no tobacco products in prison.
Right.
They abolished smoking in prison, so there are no tobacco products. But people are getting cancer from eating this horrible food at an alarming rate. There's no possible way to survive in prison. The way that the food is, the way that everything is structured, education, everything has been dwindled down to, well, like you said, the dollars always make sense to someone who's making the money.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's been occurring lately. It's a horrible place.
And we're not even gonna talk about how long River North sat for, like almost 9 years before anyone occupied it.
But we have to take it apart. We have to take it all apart.
You have to start from the bottom.
Yeah, because the things that you're talking about are key, but they're not easily dealt with because they're embedded in the system. So that I need help. We all need help in figuring out what to do when and what impact each step would have. And I know, Jen, I'm talking a lot, but I want to ask you a question, please. Would you send me an email with some personal information? Because what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is to put in a resolution saying, congratulations, you're a free man, and I can talk about you, and then I can talk about it to the General Assembly, and some of that would be part of what humanization, that would be part of awareness. And if we ever got together in person, then you could come. But we're not doing that right now. But would you mind if I did that?
Not at all.
Okay, I'll show you whatever document I come up with, whatever draft I come. Okay.
I will send my information. Jen could send you my email address or my phone number, anything you need. I'm with you.
Oh,
And
good.
I will say this, Delegate Corey,
Yeah.
I like to put it in this scenario. I'm a school teacher. So, you know, I went to college to become a school teacher. I was hired by a school district. So my immediate supervisor is my principal. So, you know, my principal doesn't stand on over my shoulder in the classroom to watch me teach, to make sure that I am adhering to
Right.
the guidelines that are set forth by the school district. You know, because I have a degree, you know, I should know what I'm doing. I'm as competent enough. She's trusting me enough to do the job and to adhere to the policies that's been in place. So one thing that I can say is that I honestly do not believe that Brian Moran, or even, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, Harold Clark would know everything that's going on inside of the prisons, because they are trusting and hoping that the qualified, competent people that they have employed are doing what they're supposed to do down the line.
No, I learned that in my visits, that each prison is like a separate fiefdom. And as you put it, with the principals in the schools, it's the same thing. And each is like, what, a little village, a little with its own borders and its own.
Correct.
When we were working on just getting me in to visit, to find out what kind of products they were providing, each prison was a different story about how in the world to handle it. And I got told a whole lot of lies.
And it shouldn't be.
That Brian didn't know, they didn't know.
No,
No,
they don't.
they should know, but they don't. And the system does not, the system that we've got in place now for management, it doesn't allow them, I think, to really have any hands-on knowledge.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
We see that in so many places, just doing the work that we do. I'm going to redirect us back a little bit. I think there's so many things that we need to fix with our criminal justice and prison system, and we're excited to work on all of those things. I think this also, to me, emphasizes, you know, our coalition's first demand is that we need to be getting people out, especially during this crisis time. And so circling back around, you know, Tony got his pardon, but as he said, it's such a long process and it's very convoluted, and there's hardly any transparency and you can't figure out what's going on. And so Eden is here tonight to talk to us about the Virginia Redemption Project, and it is going to be helping people with their pardons. And Eden, can you go ahead and tell us about this project? I'm really excited to hear from you and get to hear what it's all about.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Jen. I appreciate it. And I'm going to give Brian a quick shout out here too, because he's been one of the main instrumental folks. We talk on the phone probably at least 2 to 3 times a week together with a whole group of folks as we try and unveil this project. And so Brian, please feel free to jump in here at any point with any additional information. So basically, quickly kind of to talk about what the project is and then kind of how it evolved. So what the idea behind the Virginia Redemption Project is that, as you mentioned, there are thousands of people who are in VDOC or Virginia Department of Corrections custody, some of whom, or most of whom, don't qualify for the early release that the budget amendment allows. As you may know, the budget amendment only applies to people who are within a year of their sentence.
Right.
And so, so there are people, for example, who are 18 months out, who may have a variety of medical concerns and make them particularly susceptible to the virus. And so the idea of the Redemption Project is to pair pro bono attorneys up with individuals who are seeking the ability to file a conditional pardon request, to have those attorneys help them complete that pardon application and make it as persuasive as possible for consideration by the governor and his administration.
Eden, can I ask, for people that are trying to start a pardon, or is it also for people who, like Tony, had a pardon in for a long time?
So if anybody has a pardon pending, they can supplement that pardon with additional information. So that's certainly something that we can consider. They can have an application that's pending, and if it's, let's say it was done, by somebody very quickly because they were, currently incarcerated, didn't have access to their records. If they are paired with somebody, with an attorney who can do, so an additional research to get records to support their application, then that could supplement their application. So the way this all kind of came about, we were very fortunate. So just kind of taking us a step back, the ACLU of Virginia was involved in litigation against the Department of Corrections regarding their treatment of individuals who were incarcerated around the virus. When the virus started spreading very quickly, and as Tony mentioned, the inability to protect people and watching what was happening with the spread, we joined in with a Charlottesville attorney, Elliot Harding, to litigate against the Department of Corrections what was happening. As a result of that litigation, we entered into a settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement is, it's not a class action, but it does have what's kind of considered to be class-wide or relief that spans the entire population of people who are incarcerated. And there's a few things in that agreement. So kind of three main buckets of what that agreement includes. The first is that it includes particular, safety measures that the facilities have to have in place, many of which we are hearing anecdotally from people they're not complying with, but things like having access to clean face masks, having access to laundry multiple times a week, making sure that people are not being, I see Tony shaking his head, so I know it's not implemented, but making sure that people are not transitioned from place to place unnecessarily. Some of those things that could increase spread of the virus. And as I see everyone nodding, we have heard, like I said, from hundreds of individuals who have shared with us what's happening on the ground. Part of what we're doing on a regular basis, bringing affidavits on behalf of those individuals back to the Department of Corrections to say, we have concerns, this is what we're hearing on the ground, and requiring them to make changes as we're hearing them. So that's continuation and a continual process. The second piece is that on the early release plan that Brian discussed, that was pursuant to the budget amendment, there were certain pieces of that were requiring them to publicly report out. If you go to the ACLU of Virginia's website, there's data that we're adding every single week about the number of people that they have reviewed, the number they have rejected, the number they have gone forward, and the number of people that have actually been released, and then the number of people that they're actually testing for the virus. And then the third bucket of that agreement is about conditional pardons. And just what Jen and Tony mentioned is a conditional pardon in Virginia is basically where someone who is currently incarcerated can write to the governor and talk about extenuating circumstances and request that the governor pardon their sentence or modify their sentence. We, in the agreement, the governor was a defendant, and the administration agreed per the agreement that they would prioritize conditional pardon applications from individuals with existing medical conditions as a result of the spread of the virus, and to try and basically expedite those requests. Unfortunately, so we were very pleased with that outcome, which is something that we obviously would love to see. Unfortunately, on the flip side of that, we have really tried to press the administration for information about what they're actually doing to expedite this process, and we have been given zero information. We have been told that it's an executive privilege, that we can't have information about what they're doing. So at this point, transparency is basically nothing. We have very little information about who they're granting conditional pardons to, or whether they are in fact actually prioritizing people with medical issues. So that's concerning as well. Nevertheless,
I'm sorry, but is all of this process the same way as a regular pardon? Is that the same pathway, the conditional pardon?
So it's part of the pardon process. Yes, it's just like any of the other pardons. But like I said, the settlement agreement requires them to expedite.
Right. I know. I'm just wondering where to look, where to push, so that the information can be made public.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Tony, did you have something?
All right. One thing to mention to guys when they are filing these pardons, and it's very difficult to do now, is it's almost like applying for a job and you want to have the best possible resume so that when you show that prospective employer, this is why I'm eligible to work for you and why I'm the best candidate to work for you. You know, a lot of guys just want to get, hey, I have high blood pressure, so I should get out. Right. Hey, I understand. It's a medical condition that could cause you to die from COVID. But when building these conditional pardon resumes, one has to look at it and say, does this person qualify to be someone successful that won't come back to prison? And public safety will always be priority when it comes to anyone leaving prison. Yeah. But it's difficult to build a proper resume, as I mentioned earlier, how school has been eliminated. You know, at one time you could go to the electrical school, and after you take that, you could do HVAC, and after you do that, carpentry. But now it's only set up, if you take one trade, you can only take another one 5 years later. And if you have an extended period of time in prison, let's say 25 years, they don't even put you in school. So you're pretty much sitting idle doing absolutely nothing. So when one starts to build a resume, you know, right now it's probably based upon just medical issues versus this is why I'm the best candidate to leave prison. And this is why I'll be successful. This is why my family is fighting for me. This is why the ACLU is fighting for us as a whole. And that's very important, you know, to mention to guys when they're talking to you or anyone else in the legal parameters of that process. Right. How can I build my resume to be better suited when they see my, you know, conditional pardon? Okay, this guy can make it. Because the last thing that anyone wants to see is someone get that blessing and then see it destroyed.
Right. Absolutely, Tony. And what you said raises a great point. What they've actually shown, statistically speaking, is that when someone is paired with an attorney to help them make that case, basically, they're more likely to have success in their pardon application because they're able to pull from different resources, for example, their records, perhaps an employment history, a military history, to really kind of give the full picture of one, that this is a human, and then two, that this is somebody who is deserving to be out and back and contributing to society. And so I think that's where you know the help of an attorney can really be powerful. So just to take a step back, though, I wanted to go back to where we were. So what happened as part of this agreement is after we had the agreement, we were like, okay, well now we have their agreement that they are going to prioritize conditional pardons. We need to actually start helping people file conditional pardons. And so we kind of offhand, you know, just amongst ourselves at the ACLU, we're like, how are we going to do this? Let's see if we can put something together. We were super fortunate, and it was super fortuitous that we just so happened to have a conversation with Brian and Justice Ford, Virginia, as well as LAJC, Legal Aid Justice Center, who had also been talking offline about, wouldn't it be great if we had a pardon project and let's start putting something together. And so then the three of us together as a group, again, it was Justice Ford, Virginia, Legal Aid Justice Center, and the ACLU of Virginia, started working and talking about how we can do it between our three organizations. And initially it was going to be, you know, a little bit of a ground level project where we were going to just try and make a spreadsheet of people and a spreadsheet of people who, you know, were interested in volunteering and just try our best to match people by hand. And we reached out to an organization called the NACDL, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, because they have done similar projects in other states and at the federal level. We asked them for some technical support and help. And they in turn applied for a grant and received it to actually start and launch a new project in Virginia. The National NACDL, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, along with their Virginia affiliate, VACDL, the Virginia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, as well as LAJC and Just Forward Virginia and the ACLU of Virginia, all joined together basically to launch this brand new project. And so it's called the Virginia Redemption Project, as I mentioned. We are fortunate to be able to tap into NACDL's existing resources, and one of those is a virtual platform that has the ability for us to have trainings for attorneys who volunteer. So, for example, if you're a volunteer attorney, you can, and you're watching this live Facebook event, you can join on the website and volunteer, sign up to volunteer. We will have trainings downloaded so you can get on the website and download the trainings, download sample materials so that you can get a sense of how these applications work. You would then be assigned a client, and you would be able to kind of really get to know the client, get to know their family. As Tony mentioned, get information about them, get their employment records, get any military service records, get their prison records, anything that might be helpful to help tell their story and to put together the most compelling application possible, and then to submit that application on their behalf. And the project will also track those applications and what happens with them as they're pending before the administration. And again, I'm very pleased to hear Tony's story about the administration granting his pardon application. I wish I could say I felt that this has been broadly successful so far across in terms of considering applications, pardon applications. Under our kind of limited experience, we have not had a lot of transparency from this administration or a lot of movement in terms of doing this, which has been really unfortunate. And what we've heard kind of anecdotally from some of our partners in other states is that this is something that other states are doing pretty easily and quickly and being very transparent about. And so the fact that Virginia, that our current Northam's administration is not, has been concerning to say the least. So I think we're going to continue to work on as we move forward, and we're very hopeful that that we can really get this off the ground and get it rolling and have successful results.
What states would you say are a good model to look to?
I'm going to have Brian jump in here too, but so the other states that the NACDL has projects in, they have a project in New York, and I believe and then they have a federal level project, and then they have one in DC. Brian, am I correct on that?
Yeah, Delegate, and for everyone, the State Clemency Project, the NACDL, the New York affiliate, and the governor's office in New York have together, they actually work so closely with the governor that the Department of Corrections in New York will upload these types of documents, the internal documents, people's medical records, institutional records, right into the system that the attorneys are using, and everything's confidential and protected. So there's a lot of cooperation, and then when the application is done by the attorney, it's sent electronically to the governor's office, and the Department of Corrections automatically sends all their records to the governor's office. So the governor has the packet, the records, everything electronically, all streamlined.
Super cooperative.
Yep, they can do their review. And as people were talking about how few investigators there are for pardons and how limited some of the parole board's resources are there, the advantage of these types of projects are they come with a reentry plan all written down, the contact numbers for everybody, all the records.
Of course.
So it's really basically the lawyers and the clients and their families are all doing all the work up front to save the parole board, save the Secretary of the Commonwealth a lot of time, so that it'll take a lot less time for the governor to do this. So there's a lot of synergies that can be done there that are being done in New York that we're hoping, as the project expands in Virginia, to be able to do with the governor and the next governor and the next governor as we continue on doing this. But we need attorneys, and to highlight what Eden said, you don't have to be a criminal practitioner to do this. We're going to train you. We have a stack of trainings all ready to go. So if you have a law license in Virginia, you can help, even if you've never touched a criminal case in your life. We're going to be able to catch people up to do that. So if everyone knows a lawyer, tell them, join the project. You can, we'll put the link in the chats here for lawyers to sign up.
We'll take paralegals too.
Paralegals as well. We love paralegals. So definitely come join us, because we have a lot of stuff people can do to help.
Great.
Absolutely.
So Bong from ACLU put a link in the chat for more info on the project, and we've got a press release link. The attorney sign up link is live as well.
It is. It's in that same press release. So you should be able to go directly on there and fill in information. And that's where paralegals or legal assistants would go as well to sign up to volunteer.
Great. I can't tell you how exciting this project is. This is so great.
We are very excited, but I will still emphasize to everybody, we need to continue to put pressure on the administration to actually, these aren't going to do any good if they just sit on a desk somewhere. So we really need to put pressure on the administration to make sure that they are actively considering these and moving on them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I will say wholeheartedly, they are. But when I tell you they have a boatload, we're talking about requests that I know that have been sitting since Tim Kaine was the governor. So we're talking about Tim Kaine, we're talking about people who put in since Donald McDonald, McCullough. It's a lot. It's a lot. And then the process itself, just the investigation process, just from my experience, I would love to help you guys. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a paralegal, but when I tell you I have been through the needle in the haystack in this process.
I was gonna say, Mrs. Brown, you've been through it. That's firsthand.
I have been through the needle in the haystack in this process. So I can honestly say they have. Now, I did a lot of the footwork. So when I tell you they didn't have a lot of investigating to do with my package, they didn't have a lot of investigating. I had papers that they didn't think that I could put my hands on. I had papers out of sealed court documents. I ain't gonna tell nobody how I got it because the good Lord blesses me. But I did. But what I'm saying is, we got to understand that they do the process. And I will say that the investigator who investigated our case, he was very thorough, to say the least. He was very, very thorough. He brought back stuff that my husband had forgot when he was a kid, like a real kid, like 7 or 8 years old. I mean, they really do thoroughly investigate. So they do take time because they do want to make sure that they are dotting every I and crossing every T, because Lord help if we have one little glitch, a step that they miss, and then we'll have that Republican on the microphone on the floor saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do that.
No, you're right. You're right.
One thing that when Brian was speaking just then, I totally agree with the process that New York has, because it eliminates boxes of pardons being in an office gathering dust. Yeah. If you get technology more involved, where, like you said, it electronically goes right to the governor, that eliminates the whole process, and it helps speed up the process of waiting for years.
Yeah, I think it's inhumane to make people wait like that with no transparency and no ability to know what's going on.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
And let's not forget that we wouldn't even be having this issue if we had parole.
Right. And I'm glad that you're emphasizing that, Linda, because that is true. You know, if parole existed and if the earned sentence credit system was expanded back up, which we're going to talk about that just a brief bit in a second. We talked about that last town hall. You know, people wouldn't have to seek a pardon. Right now, pardon is pretty much the only way you can get any relief, and that's not how that system is supposed to work. It's supposed to work in circumstances. I want to shift this a little bit.
Hold on, can I say one more thing, Jen?
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Eden, and one other thing that I don't know if y'all are privy to it, anyone that works within the DOC cannot speak highly for you. They can't write a letter, they can't speak on your behalf. And in reality, those are the people that see you every day. So the people you work for, not even the volunteers. Right, the volunteers that come in from Kairos, different church organizations that come in that deal with you on an every day, every weekly basis, the chaplain, people that have character within the state of Virginia to work in a prison, they can't speak to your character to someone when they're filing your petition. And that's something that I think should be addressed, because if this is the person that sees you every day, they know your character. They've watched you either grow in a positive or watch you digress to a negative.
Right, right. Is that the case in all states, or is that peculiar to Virginia?
I know Virginia, Delegate Cora, I know Virginia is, I know that once Governor Allen just destroyed everything about prison. Of course, people have read the quotes where, you know, he said, we're not trying to rehabilitate, we're trying to destroy them. And, you know, all the things that him and Mr. Angelone did to just destroy the state of Virginia as far as the prison systems. But
so thank you for that point, Tony. That's very interesting and maybe something that we can work on getting changed. And I can look into whether it's in other states, Delegate Cora. We can do some research on that and figure it out.
Good.
I want to shift us a little bit, of course. I want to shift us a little bit to take a couple questions. We have a few questions. I don't know if we have too many more. Some folks are checking the Facebook for us. Sean on Facebook says, from my experience at Haynesville Correctional Center, Many people were being denied release under the budget amendment because their COMPAS risk assessment showed them as high risk. The COMPAS assessment is flawed when the counselors input inaccurate data, i.e. having to re-enter static factor data every year. What can be done to provide oversight and accountability for this risk assessment and its accuracy? And I have heard the same thing from many, many people that, you know, there's static factors that should just be there, but they were put in different years and there's often mistakes. And so they're using this software to assess risk assessment. It's also, I have heard, not the best calculation. There's these different factors that will give you a high score that are, some of them are straight racist and have to do with sexuality and different things. And so it's a strange system. And so I wonder what we can do about that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question and point. I was going to say, you know, this is one of the areas where I think there has definitely been evidence that have showed that these type of risk assessments, including COMPAS, have strong racial bias, which is really, really problematic. This is also one of those things that, you know, actually, and I don't have the budget amendment language before me, but there were a number of requirements that VDOC put in place that are not part of the budget amendment. So the budget requires certain things, and then VDOC actually went beyond the budget amendment to require more things. You can find their early release plan on their website, but they, you know, there has to be, you know, they certain offenses, you have to have a viable home plan. One of the issues with that is that VDOC has a policy that they won't even do a home plan until 6 months before your release date. So how does that jive with somebody who's a year out? That's one issue that we've seen a lot. You know, you have to have a certain good time earning level, either a 1 or a 2 to be considered. But that we've seen is, you know, very, very subjective depending on what's going on. Active detainers, and then recidivism risks on the COMPAS. So those are all things that were kind of added to this like bureaucratic process that the Department of Corrections put in place to review people. And as you mentioned, those are absolutely, they do absolutely have racial bias assessed with that. You know, I would love to think about this long-term about what we could do to shift assessments, because I think that that's inherently going to be a problem no matter what.
And Jen, I put in the chat, the ProPublica did an investigation a few years ago showing some of the racial biases of the COMPAS instrument. So I encourage everyone to read that article as well as the documents that back that up. And if you just Google COMPAS and accuracy, COMPAS racial issues, there's some interesting issues about whether COMPAS is more accurate than randomly guessing if someone is going to be a recidivism risk.
I apologize, my dog has decided to bark. Tony, go.
Yes, ma'am. Eden, and Brian, I took the COMPAS before I left prison and when I saw my probation officer. So they did one before I left and another when I was released. So yes, the questions are ridiculous. They are. It has nothing to do with you being home and productive in society.
Right.
Nothing at all. I mean, some of the questions are so outlandish, you would ask yourself, who wrote this?
Right.
Literally.
Well, and taking it a step further, I think, you know, one of the things that we noticed with a lot of people who've reached out to us is that it's checking recidivism risk for what you originally put in for, what your original conviction was. And so you can be convicted for something that was, you know, considered by all means a nonviolent offense. And then if you score a high recidivism rate, so let's say somebody is in for check fraud and they continue to demonstrate a high risk of check fraud. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a safety issue, but that automatically puts them in this category of people where the recidivism risk is so high that they're not considered for eligibility. So it's incredibly flawed for many, many reasons. Absolutely.
Right. So our next question is from Rashawn on Facebook, and he says, my loved one was approved but not released yet. Who do I reach out to?
That is also something we're hearing pretty frequently. And what we understand to be, and again, this is all coming secondhand from the Department of Corrections when we are inquiring about these, so please take this for what it is. What we understand is happening is that part of that delay and lag is having to do with the actual like process and mechanism of release, depending on what the person's home plan requires. So for example, if somebody is out of state, like if they have an out of state placement, it will take longer for them to get actually physically released because they have to shore up with the other state what's happening and whatnot. Same if there is some sort of a court order about somebody not necessarily being able to live in proximity with somebody else, that sometimes has to get shored up, and that can delay the release. But there is a lag time happening, and we're not sure, that can't account for all of the lag.
Mm-hmm.
There is a significant lag time happening between when someone's approved and when they are actually released. So we're still trying to get a sense of kind of why that's so long and why the numbers are so big. But yes, that's pretty common right now.
Do we know how someone can figure that out? Is there someone they should contact, or are we kind of just in the dark?
There's nobody particularly. I mean, you can continue to reach out to the Department of Corrections. They're probably not going to answer you, to be frank. Like I said, we haven't even really gotten a clear answer, and you know, we've got the oversight of a federal court involved. So my guess is that's not going to be a very satisfying answer, but it's certainly, you know, if you have concerns, I would continue to reach out to the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, and one thought I have, and maybe Delegate Corey can confirm whether this would be helpful or not. For somebody that's in that situation, Delegate, could they reach out to their legislators and see if their legislators could maybe help them try to figure it out as well?
Absolutely. And whether or not the legislator can help, that is an awareness tool.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really important. So please encourage people to do that.
Okay.
People often ask me, what's the best way to advocate? And my first answer is any way you can. And then after that, of course, face-to-face is great. Phone calls are great. Email is great. The worst is a petition with 18,000 people signing it, but if that's all you can do. So yes, encourage people, reach out to your legislators, and don't only do it once.
Yeah, and maybe Fong or Johanna maybe could put in the chat the link for people to find out who their legislators are.
Yeah.
And we can get that in the Facebook chat as well, because I think that's always important when we have these meetings to just always include that link, because so many people don't know who their legislators are. Okay. Jonathan Jones' question says, how do you get paired with an attorney for the conditional pardon process? So I think we had the attorney link, but what do folks behind bars need to do?
There is an email address, which I will tell you right now. It is, oh gosh, hang on, let me make sure I have it right. But it is VA Redemption Project at, oh wait, hang on. Said it before I had it all. VA Redemption Project at justice for the number 4 ALL.org. Right now, that is where people should email if they are interested in potentially seeking being paired with an attorney. And we, you know, somebody will get back. We're going to be having to do an intake process as part of this, but that would be, you know, part of how this works. And then once you're through the intake process, you would be paired with an attorney.
Great. And then we have one more question. Krista says, is there a way to get a copy of the COMPASS assessment? I don't know the answer to that.
So the COMPASS assessment is proprietary, so you can't get it. On that email, on the website I sent out, there have been a few times where people have been able to get it and publish it. So it's either on ProPublica, or if you start Googling around enough, you can find a list that's about 3 or 4 years old of the questions. It's something like 60 or 80 questions long, but it won't tell you, it is not public information how the questions relate to the score. That is something that cannot be released. It's secret, and not even probation and parole knows that information. But you can learn about it, and ProPublica made some guesses, so that's your best resource.
Okay, great. So I want to bring us back around a little bit. As a coalition, the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition, we decided that during this special session, we were going to support potentially 2 bills. And so we talked tonight about the Public Health Emergency Release Bill that our legislative working group drafted and that Delegate Corey is getting drafted. And we'll see if it works out for special session or not. And then we're really excited. Last town hall, we were able to have a more in-depth discussion about the earned sentence credit expansion bill, which the Humanization Project was very involved with during regular session. Delegate Scott carried the bill, and he will be carrying it for the special session, and we're very excited for that bill to be heard during this special session. And we're also very, very excited that Delegate Corey is a supporter of the bill as well. So those are the two bills that we as a coalition are pushing for this special session. And so I want to, we're going to come back around a little bit. I want to turn it and just go through the panel just really, really briefly as the panelists. And if you don't have anything to chime in, that's totally okay. But I just want to go around and say, what do you think is the most important thing? And Delegate Corey kind of already said it, but what is the most important thing that people can do as we're approaching special session, which starts next Tuesday, August the 18th? And then during special session, while it's going on, what's the most important thing that people can do to support these bills and other issues that they are finding important right now? Delegate Corey, you can repeat yourself if you want.
Happy to. First of all, don't worry about doing it right. You know, just reach out and in any way you can. The best thing to do, though, is to have a specific bill in mind. It's very difficult when people get in touch and say, oh, please, we need prison reform, or we need more money for schools. And it's great to hear that, but it's not specific. I can't act on that. It's much better if you say, this bill, you know, I support this bill, or change this bill in this way. Let me know how this bill progresses, and so on and so forth. Those are actionable advocacies. The others are, frankly, just feel good, but better than nothing. So the more specific you can be, the better.
Great.
And you have a delegate, and you have a senator, and you have a governor, and you have a lieutenant governor, and you have an AG. So you might as well just get in touch with all of them. I was talking, I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but it's also important to know, and speaking of the AG, and maybe I'm sure some of you already do know this, but if there is something, well, it's useful to keep in mind that you can ask the AG for an opinion. You can ask the AG for a conditional opinion, a casual opinion, or an opinion that would become public and then would have the force of law. And you have to do that through a legislator. And I'm always happy to get in touch and see if they will consider whatever it is that we're, you know, interested in getting an opinion on. So if anybody wants me to do that, you know, just let me know. It's unpredictable how long it'll take for the answer. But,
thanks, that's great.
Sure.
Let's see, Eden, do you have any thoughts for folks on special session advocating?
I'm going to hand that over to my colleague Jenny Glass, who's on the line.
There you
go. Yeah, I think that, so I'm the director of advocacy at the ACLU, so I work with our legislative director, Ashna Khanna, and I would say that I would echo a lot of, you know, what the delegate said. Totally not getting it right is it's fine. Getting it out there and being as specific as possible. So I think that before and after special session, and
oh yes, not just only during session,
and during as well. But you know, we're living in a really virtual political landscape right now, which I think actually has some positives. It makes it potentially a little easier to get in touch, because it's the way that everyone's going to get in touch with their legislators, either email, you know, potentially like an online or a phone call, and it kind of normalizes some of those things. Even writing a letter. I mean, I think that getting in touch any way that you can with your legislator, your delegate, or your senator, making it known that you live in their district and
right.
them to do. That's really the best thing that can happen. I think in addition to that, though, I think one of the more interesting things about Virginia's legislature is that we film a lot of it, and you can watch it, and it is no offense, delegate, some of it's incredibly boring, but
well, yes, it is. But you never know when it's going to be unboring, so you have to pay attention.
Yes, you're experiencing it. But it's something that you can certainly have in the background, going or listening to it. And you can always, mention something, bring up specific details, or just be really, clued in about what's going on, and pay attention to certain hearings. I would suggest that, I'm sure a lot of folks on this call are really, really interested in criminal legal reform. So really tune into the courts committees when they have their meetings. Right now, we don't have a ton of information to say how the public can get involved. And so it's a little hard and kind of sticking to these generalities around reaching out and everything to your legislator. But I do think that watching that and watching out for, what are the rules that the General Assembly established on that first day.
Well, we do know some of how we can have public input during.
That would be great to
session.
share.
And some of you might have participated in the public hearings of the Public Safety and Courts of Justice committees. We just had 3. And that same software package is going to be available for all our committee meetings, which means we will be streaming them. And then of course they're archived. So sometimes our archival retrieval system is not all that friendly, but you can do it. And there are phone numbers you can call if you can't figure out what it is how to find what you're trying to find. But for every committee meeting that we have, you will be able to use that same mechanism that we had in the public hearing. You'll be able to watch, you'll be able to get in a queue to possibly speak. If you can't speak, you'll be able to send an email so that all of the committee members who are participating at that time will see your message. And I wanted to also say one wonderful thing about having virtual committee meetings is we can only have one at a time. We can't have them back to back. How many of you have been like me? You run on that building, you run, and you anyway, and it's impossible, but this is great because they will be one at a time and you will be able, in case you're not bored, to watch an entire meeting.
That's also going to be great, delegate, to have everybody there for votes, right?
Yes, we won't have to play that game either.
Yeah, that's
right.
That pretty much sums up anything I would share for people to be helpful. I think the information you just shared is
Me too.
helpful to know. It'll be similar to hearings, so there'll be an opportunity to have virtual testimony and not just be relying on written testimony. For folks to be able to engage and actually share, please come and do this and support this and urge legislators to pass the bills that we want to see.
Great. Brian and Tony, do either of you have anything you want to add before Johanna's going to wrap it up for us here in just a second?
I just wanted to say briefly that things happen really fast in the General Assembly. So first of all, no offense to Delegate Corey, it's not your fault, but we have no idea what's going on in the House right now for next week. And
well, nobody does, so
it's good.
That's not entirely true, but anyway, you're not alone. How's that?
Yes, I don't feel alone. Even in a regular session, a lot of things get changed between when a bill gets drafted and when a bill gets voted on in the committee and when it gets to the floor of whatever chamber it starts in.
Right.
So following on social media, Justice Forward, ACLU, LAJC, NAACP, Humanization Project, all of us, things are going to be coming fast and furious starting next Tuesday. And we're going to need help from all of you to contact your legislators in real time, like emailing districts, calling district offices as it's happening. So stay in touch on social media next week and in the coming weeks so that you know how to best influence things as they're happening.
I want to pick up on one thing that you said that's really important about how a bill can totally change into something else in a matter of hours. And unfortunately, sometimes there's no way to know because it happens so fast that the staff can't even get it up on the website. So sometimes if you want to yell at your legislator for voting against the bill they voted for before, you need to understand that it can be a completely different bill with the same number and title. But this time, I wanted you to also know it's too late now to have anything drafted for the special. Yesterday was the deadline. And now what we're going through is what bills fall into the purview, into the categories that we already agreed we were going to look at during this session. So everything that's filed will be available publicly on the website, but everything that's filed may not make it to be heard by any committee or any person. And so then if there's a bill that never got anywhere that you want to support, be sure you find somebody who is willing to have it redrafted for the next year, for 2021, because it won't, there's no automatic. You can say a bill's continued, but that doesn't mean much. It just means you have a few more months to try to get your bill not killed. That's another story. You don't care about that. Okay, you need to redraft it, and then it could be heard in January. And there are deadlines, and I know I see you going like this, right? So it's not easy. You have to know when you can get something drafted, when you can get it amended. Otherwise, your advocacy is nice, but when people call me in February and say, "Oh wow, can you put in a bill?" No, I can't. Not in February, and it's terrible to have to say you have to wait a year.
Yeah. And that's something as with the Humanization Project where we try to share stories and share information that I find I am continually doing my best to educate people about the process.
Good.
And how it works. Because so many people just don't realize the timelines and what actually goes on and all the things that have to happen for a bill to pass.
Yep.
And so we work really hard to try to educate folks on that.
Well, in the past, I've been able to have workshops with people from the clerk's office who have come to put on an in-person workshop about the mechanisms.
Oh, that's
now, of course, I can't have that, but I'm trying to find a way to have a virtual presentation because yes, it's boring. Yes, it's detailed, but it's your only way into the system.
It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I please, if there's any information, Jen, that you don't have that you can put on your website for people, how they can access what's going on in this special, please let me know. I'll help in any way I can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tony, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Just thank you all for including us in this town hall meeting. It was wonderful. And moving forward, I think that a lot more stories like myself are out there. There are countless men who have been released from prison via parole or pardon that are doing everything the right way, working, taking care of their families, supporting their communities. And these are stories that need to be broadcast versus the stigma and this fear talk from the Republican Party about letting guys out and trying to instill a state of fear in Virginia versus a state of happiness, a state of peace.
State of second chances.
A state of second chances.
Yeah.
It's time for us to start doing things and steamrolling into 2021 with parole as a priority for this state. And that's something that has been neglected for the last 26 years.
Right.
And continue to vote the right way. Continue to keep people that are going to be in office that represent your community. We aren't happy with our delegate or senator in our community where we live in Chesapeake. And it's kind of tough because they have a stranglehold on the area based upon who lives in the area. But just continue to vote, continue to push. It's almost like a pit bull mentality. You have to grab hold of your topic and your issue and not let that go.
Every day, every day, every day.
Every day it has to be the fight has to continue because Virginia is a state going in the right direction. We saw that in November of last year. And we need to take that and just continue to steamroll towards this goal of changing this state.
We can't be sure we'll keep the majority that we have. So many people, political and not, are acting like this is going to be the status quo. We're going to have this. It's going to be a harder fight to keep it than it was to get it. So please, please tell people to be active soldiers.
Yes, ma'am.
You need to stay. Yeah, we can't get anywhere unless we have the Democratic majority for a number of years. The Republicans will just, you can void everything in 1 year.
That's right.
Yeah.
If the majority changes.
It's so important I've been stressing to try to get broadcast out to the media the good that the guys are doing who are getting out, because I think that's one of the things that the Republicans took a hammer at when COVID-19 happened and the guys started getting released.
Right.
that was their number one thing. Oh God, the murder of so-and-so, murderer is out. You know, it was horrible, but it was only a few people who actually got out. I mean, like very few, and actually didn't do anything positive. There are a slew of guys who have gotten released who are actually in their community, boots on the ground, and they're actually doing good. And I mean, waiting to be interviewed. Please, media, let's go.
Yeah, that's something that we really, really, really need. So I'm going to turn it over to Johanna to close us. So we've heard what folks can do, getting in touch with their legislators, paying attention to the social media, pay attention for the information, and then make sure that you're also sharing and liking the things that are being posted by the groups in our coalition. But Johanna, you've got a link so these things can be really easy.
Yeah, I just want to, we'll be real quick. I want to thank everybody on the panel. Tony, it's been wonderful to have you joined here. I think this is what makes this coalition really powerful, is amplifying the voices of the people that need to be heard. And I really do hope that you get in touch with Delegate Corey and we can continue to amplify that voice. So I will just end with, please also consider joining the coalition and let's continue to build power, because that is how we can really start having criminal justice reform in the state of Virginia. I've been live tweeting, all of the links are in there, so please take a look, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Tony, it's a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to working with you and your amazing wife. Thanks.
Yay.
Bye.
See you again. Good luck at the special session.
Oh, thank you.